Hey guys, this is the Mind of Lilith, and thank you for joining me today. I wanted to share my thoughts about some of the feedback that I received about my previous commentary pertaining to the way that Melody was showing up in the world during her relationship with Martell and after their divorce. And I kept saying that Melody was not aware of how people were seeing her based on her behavior because she was so mired in her own pain. And she was so isolated that she did not understand that the impact that the change in her behavior was having among her friend circle. I never said it was her fault that she was acting this way. I actually said that her friends lacked empathy to the extent that they could not understand Melody, where she was coming from, and they could not meet her where she was. Basically, what I was trying to say is that narcissistic abuse is so insidious that it affects the victim more than it does the perpetrator. So Melody has had to deal with the fallout of narcissistic abuse more than Martell has, right? Even though Martell was the one who was abusing Melody, Martell didn't lose any friends. Tisha's still his friend. Kimmy's still his friend. Marcel's still his friend. Maurice is still his friend. Destiny is still his friend. Even though he was the one perpetrating the abuse, everybody around him says, oh, but he's good to me, so I'm going to stay attached to him. That is how narcissistic abuse works. A narcissist will turn everybody against you through their actions and their behavior. It may not be overt, like he's not saying, oh, stay away from Melody. I think he did say that to Marceau, but he's not saying it. What's happening is Martell has done so much damage to Melody that she can no longer function and operate in her relationships the way she used to. That's what I'm saying. So even though Martell was the one who was doing the wrong thing, because Melody was responding to it negatively, right? She didn't have the capacity to be charming and affable and, making jokes and friendly. She didn't have the capacity to do that because she was the one being abused. Martell was the one who was the abuser. So he was able to still maintain his friendships, right? And pretend to be Mr. Nice Guy, while Melody was the one suffering in silence and isolation. I remember a couple of years ago, or was it last year, Melody talked about how different she was when it came to her children also. She was more present for them psychologically and emotionally. When you are married to a narcissist, you do not have the capacity to be present in your life, in your children's life, in your friend's life. You're psychologically damaged. And I remember months ago talking about this on my other channel, stating that Martell expected Melody to show up as a full-time mother, right? He was judging her mothering skills, but at the same time, he was abusing her in the house. So his complaint was she was suffering too loud for him. She was crying too loud for him. So he was punishing her for having the audacity to express discontent about his behavior. And he was judging her mothering based on that. So he was judging her mothering based on her being abused by him and not being able to be as present as she wanted to be. Most, if not all, women who are victims of narcissistic abuse cannot be fully present for their children because a narcissist demands undivided attention from you at all times. And they will do things to force you to focus on them, like a petulant child. What do children do when they want attention? They break stuff. They make noise. They start crying and they throw things around. They do things to force you to pay attention to them. So Martell would cheat even more because, Melody's worried about where I am now. She's not focused on her career as much. It's about me now, right? He did these things intentionally to get all of the attention on him. Okay, so while he's doing this, Melody is now traumatized. She's not operating the way she normally does. And the people around her, her so-called friends, are not connecting the dots between what Martell is doing and how Melody is behaving. All they're seeing is how Melody's behaving. And as a community, we often do this. We often look at the symptoms of the problem and blame the person for having symptoms as opposed to addressing how they got to that point in the first place. How did Melody get to the point where she is testy and impatient and hypervigilant and doesn't want to talk to anybody? She wants to isolate herself. How did she get to that point? So because her so-called friends aren't acknowledging what actually happened, they're still going to be friends with Martell. So I referenced the Iyanla Vanzant episode where the woman was in a house with 19 people, not 13. 19 people who were her husband's relatives, and they were all complaining about her negative behavior, right? Which is a natural reaction, because sometimes when people act negatively, you want to respond in kind. But none of them were considering the fact that she lost a baby and now she's in a house full of 19 people. And her husband never even consulted her on that. Asked her, how do you feel about that? The husband was using the people in the household to hide from her too. So she felt like she was being attacked as well in her own home. Now it's drinking. Now it's arguments and fights. So there's a parallel in this situation, because in our community, a lot of us are victims of abuse. And instead of us talking about it, we'll lash out at people. And then the people will say, well, what's wrong with you? Right? While the abuser gets off scot-free, because people don't see what the abuser has done. The abuser usually hides behind a nice personality, charm, looks, affability, congeniality. They hide behind those things to make sure that you don't see them for who they really are, because if you did, you wouldn't be able to give them supply, your attention, your friendliness, your time, your affection. It is very ironic that everybody has fallen out from Melody except Martell, who was the reason why Melody was acting differently in the first place. That is narcissistic abuse. Martell's going to pretend like he doesn't know why Melody is having a hard time with these people. He's going to act like Melody was always this way in order to justify abusing her. But he was doing that from the beginning of their relationship. He's going to pretend like he doesn't know why Melody has changed and her attitude has changed. And she's essentially a different person. He's going to, play dumb so that he looks like he hasn't done anything and he can't be called out for contributing to these problems. The fact that all these people are closer to Martell than they are to Melody, to me, indicates that they don't understand what he's done to her. And like I said before, they may not want to, because they like Martell until Martell turns on them. Once they're affected by Martell's negative behavior, now they see, oh yeah, he's a powder keg. He's a loose cannon because he's affecting you. Now imagine what Melody went through for all those years. And nobody understood that. And they didn't want to understand it. So Melody was confused. Like, why are these people coming at me? And we were also confused. Why are these people coming at her? It's because they did not see or understand or want to acknowledge or recognize what was happening to her, because they wanted to maintain a relationship with Martell. They didn't want to connect the dots between Melody's behavior and Martell's abuse, period. So they'd rather sacrifice their relationship with Melody to be in Martell's good graces for whatever reason, right? Well, I know the reason. Marcel knows that Martell knows where the bodies are buried, and so does Maurice. You remember the scene in season 2 when Chris was the real estate, I think, broker. He was talking to Martell in the office about 47 acres, and he was like, did you think about how your behavior was affecting your marriage? And then Martell snaps back. Did you think about it when you cheated? Completely throwing him under the bus, right? The same thing he did with Marcel. But somehow he's maintained these relationships because he knows how to play the game. What is the game? Always having a source of supply. Always having friends, people, supporters, people who think that he's the good guy, who thinks that he is somebody that he's not, who believes in the fantasy of who he's projecting himself to be, this illusory character who's a good man, a good guy, all this stuff. He's doing that on purpose. He's very calculated. Narcissists are very calculated, and Martell is smarter than he actually looks. He was smart enough to snag a woman like Melody with nothing under his belt but false promises and hope. Okay, he's not a dummy. He's just lazy, and he's just a bad person in general, in my opinion. So, like I said, I wasn't trying to blame Melody for her behavior. What I was saying was that she was so isolated by her own grief, her own pain, and her own trauma that she could not connect with anyone else. She could not see how other people were being affected by the changes in her. She was only concerned about saving her life. When you're with a narcissist, every day is a fight for your life. It is a fight for your soul. It's a fight for your mind and your spirit and your body. When you are in a narcissistic relationship, you're always fighting for the right to live. And it may not be a physical threat, but energetically, The narcissist wants to consume you. They want to consume your light, your passions, your beauty, your energy, your ambitions. They want to be you. But because they can't do that, they're going to force you to pay attention to them in order to feel validated by somebody that they deem as more valuable than them. So in other words, Martell only felt valuable when Melody gave him her undivided attention. Forget your career, forget the kids, forget your ambitions and dreams and goals. Forget that. Just focus on me so I can feel valuable. If you don't do that, I'm going to abuse you till you do that. Until you focus on me. Until you give me all your attention and all the credits, right? That is what essentially happened. And over time, that corrodes a person's spirit. It corrodes a person's mind to the point where they don't even know who they are anymore. And if they don't know who they are, how are they able to connect to people, their friends, in the same way they used to? They're different now. But like I said, the irony and the tragedy is Martell was the one abusing Melody, but Melody's the one who lost all her relationships. And my point was, when you are trapped in grief and darkness, you can't see that, right? So I'm not blaming Melody for anything. I'm basically acknowledging the extent of the abuse that she went through to the point where she couldn't even see how her actions were affecting the people around her. And the people around her did not care about her enough to acknowledge this or respect it. So the issue that she's having with Destiny at this point is because of that. I can't see Destiny's pain because I'm in pain myself, but nobody's seeing my pain either, which is more extensive because I've been with this man for 10, 12, 13 years, and these people are still friends with the man who abused me. How can I be empathetic with Destiny if she's still friends with my tormentor? She's friends with the reason why we're disconnected right now. I'm going to repeat this. Tisha, Kimmy, and Destiny are still friends with the individual who's responsible for destroying their relationship with Melody. They're friends with the reason why they're not friends with Melody anymore, which is Martell. They're friends with the cause of the problem, right? Do you know how many stories that you read online about, this perfect couple, the perfect husband? He's a pillar in their community. He has a great career, has all this money, but behind closed doors, he got all these women he's cheating, right? He ends up killing his wife for whatever reason. And they were shocked, like, oh my God, this was a perfect family, the perfect couple. People say that Melody is about appearances and she cares about her image. So the hell does Martell. Martell's actually a lot more particular and protective of his image than Melody is. Because Martell's image is based on false pretenses, pretending to be something that he's not. So he has to protect that. And when Melody kind of burst the bubble on that whole fallacy, he was outraged, enraged, and outraged. He was going to destroy her now because she was basically, in his mind, destroying this image of who he wanted to present himself to be in society. And that gave him value. That's why he attacked her even more after she exposed what was going on. So again, to clarify, I will never blame Melody for protecting her peace and her energy. What I'm saying is, from a bird's eye view, if Melody's behavior changed, then that affected the people around her. But the people around her did not care about her enough to wonder why she's changed, to try to figure it out and be more empathetic to her. They wanted to maintain their relationship with Martell at the expense of finding out what happened to her. And that is the crux of the issue. The jealousy thing is a part of it, but the real issue is Melody's friends want to maintain a relationship with a narcissist. They want to maintain their friendship with the narcissist. And in order to do that, they have to sacrifice Melody. That is the crux of all these issues. They want to hold on to Martell because they've fallen for his charm and his looks, right? And his fake personality. And because of that, they refuse to see what has happened to Melody. And we can't act like this doesn't happen in our community because guess what? There are plenty of predators and rapists and abusers and pedophiles and murderers walking among us that get away with doing damage to our community because somebody likes them, because they have a nice personality, because they're friendly and funny. This happens all of the time. Just like the family members that were in the house, 19 people, refused to see why this woman was stressed out, why she was in pain, why she was lashing out at them, why she was drinking so much, because guess what? They low-key felt guilty about being in our house. But instead of acknowledging we're contributing to the problem, they wanted to blame the problem solely on her. She has an attitude problem. She drinks too much. She's this, that, and the third. She's the cause of the problems, but there's 19 people in her house and nobody's acknowledging that she lost a child. So it makes it easier to blame the victim, like Tisha did, like Kimmy did, right? In a way. Destiny, not so much. Destiny has not said anything negative about Melody. We have to acknowledge that too. We have to. And this is why I said it's difficult to be team anybody, right? Not because you don't support people, but when you do that, you basically are creating superheroes and supervillains. And when you have superheroes and supervillains, the superhero can never do any wrong, or can never make a mistake, or can never have a misstep or miscalculation. That's dehumanizing them. Or the supervillain, the same thing. They can never do any right. They're always wrong. There's always a problem, right? When we do that, we basically cheat ourselves of the opportunity to learn from these situations. Because there's a lot more nuance involved than just Destiny's all bad because she's jealous. Yes, there may be jealousy there, but that's not the reason why they broke apart as friends. The reason why is because that Melody's behavior changed as a result of Martell's abuse. That's the problem. Martell abused Melody to the point where she could not function well in her relationships. She had to isolate herself. She could not be there for her friends the way she used to. And nobody is attributing this change to Martell. That is the problem. They're still friends with the problem. And until they stop being friends with the problem, because that isolates Melody too. How are you friends with this man that caused me so much damage? How? Because they don't see it and they don't want to. For the reasons we talked about before, jealousy, competitiveness, petty shit, it happens. We get it. But that's what happens when you're with a narcissist. When you're dating, married to, or in a serious relationship with a narcissist, more than likely you're going to isolate yourself from your family, your friends. They don't know who you are anymore. You've completely changed. You're not the same person anymore. You've gained weight or lost weight, right? You're stressed out. You're depressed. You don't show up the same way. But it's like, that's what happens. Almost 100%. No, 100% of the time. 100% of the time when you're dating or in a relationship with a narcissist, you're going to suffer. And you will not be able to maintain healthy relationships with yourself, your children, your family, friends, co-workers, nothing. Because all of your attention and energy is focused on appeasing the narcissist. Okay? So please don't think I'm blaming Melody for anything. That makes no sense to blame her for any of this. What I am saying is the change in her behavior affected the people around her. That's a fact. That's not a fault. That's a fact, right? Her behavior changed. She did not see how her behavior was changing or how that affected her friendships. Her friends didn't care about why. They just cared that they weren't getting access to her anymore. They weren't getting what they wanted from her anymore. They were so used to her pouring into them. When she needed help, they didn't know how to do it because they never exercised that muscle. Melody always showed up like a boss, always showed up ready to help and support people. And so there was atrophy on their end. We don't really have to do anything for Melody because we're used to doing everything for us. So if something's wrong with her, that's all her fault because she always has it together. And we didn't do nothing, right? And, to be fair, Tisha and them didn't really do anything to Melody until this whole divorce thing happened. It was all Martell. And Melody pulled back to heal and protect herself. But her friends did not care about it. I don't want to keep repeating myself again. Like I said, please do not think that I'm blaming Melody for being a victim of narcissistic abuse. That would be nonsensical. And I have talked about this story for about, 8, 9 months now? I don't know. About 7, 8 months now? I've talked about this story for months. So you guys know my stance on this, right? I would never blame Melody for being abused. But we have to acknowledge that there was a change in her behavior because of the abuse. You have to connect the dots. You can't just say, oh, she was abused so much and then act like that didn't change who she was. And guess what? When you change, your relationships, two people change too. But the nature of those relationships will indicate how you rebound from those changes, how adaptive those relationships are to those changes. And these people were not adaptive to Melody because they're used to her pouring into them. So they didn't know how to give a fuck about her when they should have. Not saying Destiny because her situation is different. She's known Martell for years, right? Not saying her because, again, she has never said anything negative about Melody per se. Not directly that I've heard anyway. So I have to give her some leeway. You can't judge her the same way you would judge Tisha. That is not fair. And if it's one thing as a person, I'm a fair person. Even though I get on Martell a lot, it's because he's actually done something that was fucked up. But for the most part, I try to have a fair assessment of what's going on the ground. And it's exhausting to try to force people into a box to fit a narrative that we want to support. I don't think Destiny is all a bad guy, but I do think that she is not as empathetic to Melody as she should be. If she were as empathetic and she really understood what Martell did to her, she would not be friends with Martell, number one. Or number two, she would understand why Melody doesn't want to fuck with her. She would understand it on both ends, to be honest. And that is where the issue is with Destiny. The fact that you're still friends with somebody who abused your so-called best friend, or the fact that you don't understand why your best friend doesn't want to fuck with you no more because you're still dealing with the man who abused her. One or the other, but at the same time, if she's out there by herself, I can't blame her for not needing a village too, especially if Martell has been supportive of her. It's very complicated, you see? You can't just make it black and white. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. I have several readings to finish over the next couple of days, but hopefully by the end of this week, I'll post another astrological perspective video on my Wounded Womb channel. So just check in with the community board for posts and updates about what I'm going to be doing on that particular channel this week. Yeah, I enjoy reading you guys' feedback. It gives me the opportunity to learn how to communicate my thoughts better because I thought I made it clear that I wasn't blaming Melody for anything. But perhaps the way that I think about things sometimes is so unusual. I assume that I'm getting my message across the first time, and that's not always the case. So I'm going to leave it there. I look forward to reading your comments. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will speak to you soon.